Let's start with a round of introductions. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your career, and the company that you work for today? Let's start with Sabina. Can you tell us a bit about your career path and your work at HTech?
Sure, thanks, Valerie. So my name is Sabina Russell. I've been involved in BC's tech sector for about 25 years now, and most of that time has been with hydrogen. So I started my career, I'm a mechanical engineer by background. I started my career at Ballard Power Systems, doing similar work to what Ben's group does at Loop, which is developing fuel cell systems for automotive, heavy duty, stationary power. I spent 18 years there in a mix of very deeply technical engineering and research and development roles. And then I started to get frustrated with how long it was taking for fuel cells to get out in the world. So I jumped to the commercial side, learned about why it's so hard to introduce new technology, and ended my time at Ballard as Director of Product Engineering. Then I started up a consulting firm, which I ran for 7 years, and got much more involved in government policy, recognizing that that was really what was holding back deployment of these low carbon fuels. So 7 years did that, wrote the hydrogen strategy for Canada, and then decided, you know what, it's really time to build infrastructure. That's what we need today. So now I'm the Vice President of Clean Fuels at HTech. HTech is focused on fueling the drive to hydrogen. So we work across the hydrogen value chain, and my group is responsible for developing production and liquefaction facilities in the $10 to $300 million range to produce the fuel we need to enable zero emission transportation. So it's lovely to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sabina. And over to you, Jay. Can you give us a bit of an introduction about you and your company?
Sure can. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. As was mentioned earlier, I guess I've been in energy space over 40 years now. I started my career in power plant operations, actually nuclear power plant operations, and ran nuclear power plants for about the first half of my career. And in the second half of my career, kind of migrated from the operational side into the business side of energy, and have been involved in, I guess, in the last 20 years or so, in about $25 billion of energy-related transactions, and migrated over to General Fusion in the fall of 2020. And at General Fusion, we're developing an electricity generation platform using fusion energy as our heat source, and we're focused on delivering that early in the next decade. So I have a carbon-free source of electricity generation that's a true game changer in that space.
Thank you, Jay. How about you, Michael? Can you give us a quick introduction?
Absolutely can. Michael Orrick. I'm with a company called Global Relay. Global Relay operates data centers, which store data for primarily the financial and other regulated industries that are required to store their data away for 7 years. So used to be a very simple sport because people just emailed to each other. And of course, now Gen Z, millennials, everybody else working from home is using many, many, many platforms. My background is 25 years in compliance SaaS software. So that's where I come to this from. Vancouver company. I'm an Aussie who is transplanted into the high mountains of Colorado.
Thank you, Michael. And last but not least, Ben, can we get an introduction from you?
You bet. So I've got a 30-year career in technology. Started my life as a computer engineer, working in software and internet in the 90s. Enjoyed the dot-com boom and really got bitten by the startup and high growth bug during that process. Mid-2000s, I decided I wanted to make a change into clean energy, worked with a wind energy company for a period of time, and then was introduced to the founder of Loop Energy in 2012. Joined on to help him figure out how to productize the cool technology that he developed around fuel cells, and was made CEO in 2016. So I've really been driving the commercial deployment since that time. So that's my career ADD track, I would call it, for the last 30 years. And Loop is a fuel cell engine company. So we build fuel cell engines for commercial vehicles. They're a zero emission power source for an electric powertrain. And so we focus on commercial vehicles, buses, light, medium, and heavy duty trucks. The only emission is water, a little bit of steam, and the fuel is hydrogen. So it is a clean and green way to power commercial vehicles. We've got customers around the world from China to North America to Europe.
Wow, we got some amazing talent, lots of decades and decades of combined experience here, very exciting companies. And I would like to kick off the panel with a question around climate change as a pressing issue that we're hearing about on a daily basis. We're also experiencing it with extreme temperatures, flooding, heat waves. And I'd love for you to share with the audience here what it means to you to tackle climate change. Michael, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Why tackle climate change? I guess 101 for us is that data centers are they're not a clean business globally. They use an incredible amount of power. If you put a data center into a commercial building, it's going to use between 10 and 50x the power that building will otherwise have used. And so therefore you have to step forward and decide how you want to do that. And in the instance that we built out in North Vancouver, we deliberately went out to design, build and operate as clean a tech facility as we possibly could. So you may think that's a sort of trivial piece, but it's really better to draw your power off of local dams and places like this and use hydro than it is to use coal or oil-fired generators or some of the other options that are there in the market. But that's enough from me. I can cover more later.
Thank you, Michael. How about you, Sabina? You've tackled climate change in a bunch of different capacities.
Yeah, I guess I took your question a bit differently. Like, what does it mean to me to tackle climate change? So I'll answer it in a more personal way, is that, I got drawn to dedicating my career really in this area early on. I'm a mother of two, 20-year-old, 18-year-old daughters, and I think a lot about the future. And I think sometimes it's dangerous the more you know about the situation around climate change and the challenges ahead we have. But for me, it's a deeply personal issue. I worry about the future for the next generation. There's so many different ways we can each contribute, and I think we just need to each find some way to make a difference. I find it makes me feel more hopeful about the future when I'm taking action. I started looking at clean transportation early in my career, and so that's my focus, is really enabling this transition to zero emission vehicles, both because of climate change, but even living conditions in our urban centers. Early on, I was working in China and California and realizing there's many impacts that humans are having in our environment. So it's just really fundamentally important to me. And I feel very thankful to be able to work in a sector that every day is very focused on trying to make the world a better place for our kids.
Thank you, Sabina, for sharing that. How about you, Ben?
Well, I don't know what to say now that Sabina gave my answer. So I also took this personally. So Loop is a clean energy company. I mean, our whole mission is to get rid of emissions. So there isn't really a decision point there corporately. So I would say the way I would answer this is more to do with me personally. So I did spend, as I mentioned, the first half of my career in software and internet companies. I made the conscious decision to move into clean energy in the mid 2000s, and that coincided with sort of the timing of the birth of my second daughter. So the similarity to Sabina's, I have 15, 17, and 20-year-old daughters. But I just really, I looked at it and I wanted the work that I was doing to make a difference. And I think climate change is one of those things that can be overwhelming. I mean, we're inundated with headlines and doomsday scenarios, and it is it's a very challenging thing. The consequences are significant. There's no question of that. But I think, like Sabina, I find myself, I find that if I'm doing something, it's easier for me to cope with that. And so when I was with the wind energy company, that was a very interesting technology. When I met the founder of Loop, I didn't know anything about fuel cells at the time. And it was really important to me. It took me about 6 months of working with him and trying to understand the technology before I joined, because I didn't want to be involved in a science project. It was really important to me that if I was involved in something that was on the clean energy side of things, that there was a pathway to a product and making an impact, and the economics were a huge part of that. So a lot of the work we did in that first part of being with Loop was figuring out what's the commercial business case here and does it work? And that's ultimately why I joined the company. And so that was a big driver for me, because we need to make changes to impact climate change, but I think we also need to be pragmatic enough to realize that the level of adoption we're going to get with these technologies is going to be limited unless there's a commercial business case for them. And so that's just the practical side of things. So today at Loop, we got a practical business case. We've got a great technology. We're seeing great progress in the market, and climate change is, as a general topic, for me, overwhelming, but it's helpful to know that what I'm doing is making an impact, and the more successful we are as a company, the better the impact is.
Thank you, Ben. And how about you, Jay, either from a personal perspective or from General Fusion's perspective? What does it mean to you to tackle climate change?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll give you both. And just like Ben and Sabina, I guess it's my wife, what she tells me every day when I get ready to go to work, is go change the world, right? So it's that's the potential that fusion energy can bring to the market, and maybe just kind of a reflective answer on the last couple of weeks, having been very fortunate to be part of the Canadian delegation to COP, just to be there with the rest of the whole world, to really hear the impassioned pleas of those who are dealing with, as a kid, I grew up on the Gulf of Mexico and really understood what the acute effects of Mother Nature look like when a hurricane would hit. To listen to these pleas from these nations with this, just the chronic long-term impacts of climate change and the way that affects countries and the way that ends up affecting individuals. There's just a need to create a solution to the problem that's facing us. And the space that we're in today, still 80% of the world's energy production comes from fossil fuels. So we've got a very long way to go in a very short time to come up with an answer. So by introducing a technology like fusion energy with a fuel source that comes from seawater, with carbon-free electricity being produced, it really is a game-changing technology that when we can get that developed, is going to make a huge impact on a big sector that is, very significantly contributing to global warming, and we want to offset that.
Thank you, Jay. And we're going to stay with you for the next question. When it comes to advancing climate leadership, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in General Fusion's journey? And what did you learn from those experiences?
Yeah, I'll answer that by saying, I guess we're still on the journey. It's a technology. We're a new technology. We're coming to the market. We'll be demonstrating our technology in the rendering that you see behind me is our fusion demonstration program that we're actually building over in the United Kingdom at the UK's Fusion Research Hub in Cullum, just outside of Oxford. But as we do progress our technology, it's one of those things where working with government, here in Canada as well as around the world, of introducing fusion as an energy source that can mitigate climate change in a very, very big way. And so getting that engagement into policy discussions within government and then also within business is key. And then the other thing I guess we're seeing is, as we move this forward, is just engagement of government support to move technologies like this forward into the market as well. So it's I think it's a longer journey, and it's something that is getting traction, and just grateful to be part of that as we do begin to move all of it forward.
Thank you, Jay. How about you, Sabina?
Yeah, so many challenges, but I'll pick one. So we're an infrastructure company at HTEC, and everyone talks about hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. There's this chicken and egg problem. I hate that expression because I've heard it for so many years, but is you can't deploy vehicles until you have stations and hydrogen supply. But if you're trying to deploy stations and establish hydrogen supply, you can't make any money because there's no vehicles. And so, that's been a challenge for HTEC, is trying to build out this network of fueling stations when there's very limited number of vehicles to help justify the business case of the substantial investment. And when you look at a battery electric, which are also great technology, it's one charger can charge one vehicle, but with a fueling station with hydrogen, it's a bigger capital investment. Makes a lot of sense for kind of heavy duty type of applications where you need to deploy the vehicle very quickly. It's not cheap and easy to do it. So we've had to really, the way we've kind of overcome that is just by being very open and collaborative with government, with the automotive companies, even to say, we need to work together to build this capacity before the vehicles are here. How do we solve that together? And so we had to go slow and carefully at first and not get too far ahead of ourselves, or we would have gone bankrupt. And now we're at a point where the sector is really accelerating, and I'd say a challenge we have right now is a culture shift, which is, there's a lot of competitors coming, the big players are getting involved. So now speed is really important. Whereas before it was making sure we could get funding for each station and make each one pencil out. So for us, it's that supply demand balancing challenge when we're developing infrastructure that's so transformational and new, has certainly not been easy along the way.
I imagine. Thank you, Sabina. How about you, Michael? You alluded a little bit earlier when you were talking about your North Vancouver data center. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've been facing in your company's journey, and what did you learn from those experiences?
Well, as tempting as it is, Valerie, to talk about the E in the ESG, I actually might take a lesson from Sabina and just go the personal route for a second. I actually think the social side, the S in ESG, is actually the biggest challenge we face in our business right now. So the whole sort of tech field, yes, we have big problems around power and data, but if you think about the social impacts that are going on in the world, we are trying to store data in a world where it's just hitting a plethora of different platforms. And so the impact of Generation Z, even millennials, the impact of having 8 billion people in the world, everyone wants to communicate. Data has gone from being structured to unstructured. And companies like big banks are being required to store information for 7 years in every contact they have with people that's around investment or finance. Fintechs generate an even bigger problem. We're dealing with a fintech customer at the moment that's generating 1 petabyte of marketing emails every month. And that's a vast amount. To think about 1 billion, it might be an easier number to get your head around. So the problems that COVID has brought about, the problems that consumer apps have brought about, the problems that people working from home and a diversified multi-generational workforce have brought about, all collide in this sort of tsunami of data that's now exploding on the world. And most of us just let it go past, right? It doesn't matter to us. We touch a little piece of it every day. But for these people who are regulated that actually have to store data because somebody's going to come back and sue you, or a regulator's going to come in and audit you, that's actually become a mountain of a problem. And so what that delivers to my doorstep is the problem of how do we store data as we expand globally in a clean, regulated, and efficient way. The investment to innovate is vast, and you've got some hydrogen examples here on the table. These are massive upfront investments you have to make to get into a different energy source, and you've got moral choices to make. So our challenges are, the biggest challenge I'd call out is just social, Valerie.
Thank you. That's a very, very interesting perspective. Ben, how about you? You were talking earlier that you were bitten by the startup bug long ago. So I'm sure you've been through your share of challenges that you faced over the course of your career.
Well, I think like everybody on this call, every day presents new challenges, right? So that's just the nature of what we've decided to do. You know, I guess I was trying to think of what sort of a macro challenge has been, or a theme. And I would say, you know, inertia of existing businesses. is one of the biggest things that we have to be creative about trying to figure out ways around. I mean, we're operating in the automotive supply chain. This is a trillion-dollar global industry with huge amounts of capital invested in manufacturing, supply chains, sales channels, and change is extraordinarily disruptive to status quo and more importantly for those companies to earnings and revenue. And so although you may have a better mousetrap and although it may have a commercial business case, getting that system into place, I think Sabina voiced that she had some of that frustration when she was at Ballard. There are a lot of entrenched interests that don't really want change, and they may speak publicly about a desire to move to clean energy, but the actions don't line up in the boardroom and elsewhere. And so for us, we just have to work with that, and we need to get through that. And this is as much about, in terms of solving it, about getting the right team around us at Loop and identifying the customers that do want to move and the people that can be allies in industry and just chipping away at it and getting the growth moving. And so we've been seeing more of that in recent years, but that has definitely been the challenge. And I think moving forward, that will continue to be the challenge. So we're headed into a recession, and I can tell you one of the first things to go when you head into a recession is the clean energy, the motivation to go after clean energy. There's a temptation to fall back on the old ways. So that would be our biggest challenge. I don't expect that to change.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to stick with you for a moment. Maybe on a more positive note, you're clearly making a big impact, and we're so pleased to celebrate all of you at the Technology Impact Awards in the Game Changer Climate Solutions category. Could you share some of the successes that you've had to date? And maybe give us a sneak preview on what's on the horizon for 2023 and beyond?
Sure. So like maybe a bit of a sandwich. I think 2023 is going to be a challenging year for a lot of us. It's shaking up that way. But the successes we've had over the last few years have been tremendous. Our team has done a phenomenal job. We really launched our first product in 2021. We got a good number of customers. We had 10 customers. We got orders for 20 units, almost 20 units. We delivered, we had good revenue, but we've blown through that this year. We set expectations at the beginning of the year that we would be able to triple the customer activity. We had to revise that mid-year to a 5x. So, we're on track to do 5 times the business we did this year than we did last year, and we expect next year to be another 5x over top of this year. So just as I said, the inertia is challenging, but we're starting to break through clearly in a number of areas, and we're really pleased with the way that's going on the commercial front. And we just launched a new product in September, which we're very excited about from a performance perspective, and it's being extremely well received by the market. So this has been a really good year. And on the positive side, we're expecting continued growth going into 2023. But I think also just being practical and responsible, recognizing that we've got interest rates going up. There's a lot of talk of recession. And I think our customers are going to be perhaps taking a little bit more conservative approach as we go forward. So maybe the growth rate doesn't quite maintain as we've got it, but we're still looking forward to a fantastic year next year.
Thank you, Ben. So cautiously very optimistic. How about you, Michael?
Successes to date. I'd like to call out the innovations that we put into the data center that we built in North Vancouver there. Our goal overall was to create a new type of data center because they are effectively very high energy drains. So we were looking for something we could create that was sustainably low in greenhouse gas emissions. So we used 3 different types of innovation, which I think are all entertaining in the diversity. Firstly, taking an idea from the ancient Egyptians, we use actual water blankets to cool our IT and electrical equipment. We bring air in, we push it through water blankets to cool, as opposed to mechanical air conditioning. This has the impact of reducing our energy footprint there, our energy usage by 50% over the year. And so that's one good piece. When we need power, as you do a lot in data centers, we use hydropower from local waterways. So we lean in on low carbon renewable energy rather than fossil fuels that way. and we back up with small things like LED lighting, and variable frequency drives that save energy. So we're only using it when we need it. And for our UPS, our power supply, instead of toxic lead acid batteries that you have to replace every few years, we generated kinetic energy. So we have 600-pound flywheels that spin at 7,000 RPMs and create enough kinetic energy that when we do need to switch off a center and flip over to an alternate center, we've got enough cover completely without traditional energy sources. So we actually do have to use some traditional data centers to overflow. And when you measure what we do here in North Vancouver versus an equivalent traditional data center we use elsewhere in Canada, we are 247% more efficient. So we only generate a mere 79 metric tons of CO2 against the 272 metric tons that would be traditional in that space. So it's not perfect, but it's all heading in the right direction. So that's just some different ideas we brought to bear. And our challenge in calendar 23, is to do this outside Canada, because our customers move and our customers are global and our business moves, and we have to be able to do that within regulation and still find really clever power sources in different locations in different countries. We're never going to go coal, but you actually have to find the cleanest ways of doing this. So that was our story.
Thank you, Michael. Very impressive numbers. I'm having a very hard time imagining a 600-pound flywheel spinning at 7,000 RPM. So
We've got a lot of them spinning. So yeah, don't get near it.
How about you, Jay? Can you share some of the successes you've had to date and what's on the horizon for 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah. So as a bit of background, General Fusion as a company, we've been around for 20 years this year. So just, fusion is not easy to do, but as a company, just the last couple of years are the culmination of a lot of efforts that have been put in. So in 2021, we really got to the point that with our technology, with our ability to produce plasmas that we can maintain magnetically confined for the lifetime that we need them to be contained to use them, and the way our technology works. And it's a compressive type of technology. So as we develop, our prototypes and actually been able to validate in engineering performance what our simulation models have shown us we need to do, and how we are actually able to compress this plasma the way that we need to, in 2021, both of those kind of came together. And when all that was going on, we were able to really advance in our designs to the point that it's kind of like when Henry Ford, I guess, decided to make a car. It wasn't here's a car and let's go put it on the track. There was probably a transmission team, an engine team, a chassis team, and you had all those working together, and you get to the point where we're ready to put all this together and demonstrate the performance of the car. That's really what 2021 did for us. And it was able, just through advancements in our designs, to be able to come together and put together the design for the facility that's behind me. And we're actually in process of selecting our contractor, and that should be awarded before the end of the year and start construction on that facility early next year. The other thing that as a company for us, the last just couple of years have just been tremendous growth for us. So we're in process of moving from Burnaby into new facilities, actually at YVR Airport. So we've just spent $20 million refurbishing a 60,000 square foot facility. For us, it's a lab space that was it was a rather challenging space to try and find, but we were able to work with YVR and find a perfect facility and be kind of an inaugural candidate to fit in with their innovation corridor there at the airport. So getting new labs, new facilities being put in place there, continue to develop our prototypes, here in Vancouver, expand our technology capabilities here, as well as our front office and back office corporate headquarters there as well. And then as we go into 23, It's about taking the next steps with the technology and getting the construction of a facility started. And we're doing that also in a way, we're doing that globally. We opened up a brick and mortar office in 2021 adjacent to the Oak Ridge National Lab in the United States, where the U.S. Department of Energy does most of their fusion research. So we've got some collaborative efforts ongoing there. We also have some collaborative efforts going on, back in the UK as well. Just right up the street from where we're building this is where the UK does its fusion research. So we've got a collaboration agreement in place with the UK AEA as well to advance things technologically on that front with them as well. So as we go into 23 and look ahead, it's about getting the foundation set and starting the construction of this facility with anticipation of going operational with this in a couple of years there in the UK.
Very exciting. Thank you for sharing that, Jay. And how about you, Sabina?
Yeah, well, as I described the challenges of trying to balance supply and demand and build infrastructure ahead of vehicles coming. And I think a success for HTEC is, we have managed to build Canada's first network of hydrogen refueling stations at retail fueling sites in British Columbia. So we have 4 stations that are open in Vancouver, Burnaby, Victoria, and I just forgot the last one all of a sudden. And we're about to open one in Kelowna in the coming weeks, and we have 12 more in development. And so personally, I drive a fuel cell car. I'm on my second one. And so as a user of them, it's just so great to have now this network of operational stations. And it's really poised us to be able to suddenly release a lot more vehicles in the region. The OEMs the car manufacturers want to see a certain number of stations for redundancy before they'll go from, hundreds a year into thousands a year. So we're really poised for that. And we've started building our network of fueling stations in Quebec as well. And why BC and Quebec? Because we have zero emission vehicle mandates. And so, that's where it's happening first in Canada, but it's going to follow across the rest of Canada as well. And when I look forward to 2023, we have a lot of projects. HTEC tends to be a little bit quiet compared to a lot of other hydrogen companies around in terms of what projects we're developing, and we have some really exciting shovel ready projects that we're in the permitting stages or even in construction. And so coming from British Columbia myself and having seen over the years Ballard has to buy their fuel from California, we ran buses where we bought fuel from Quebec. Guess what? We're going to be producing a lot of low carbon intensity renewable hydrogen in British Columbia very soon. We're building some production facilities, multiple in BC and others across Canada as well. So I'm so excited personally to, that's my group that's building those facilities to break ground and start that next phase of expanded infrastructure being developed here in Canada.
Thank you, Sabina. And I see we have some questions that have come through in the chat as well. Erica, do you want to share some of those?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks everyone in the audience for dropping some questions here. So the first one I think is going to be aimed at Michael, but certainly open to comments from the panel. What are some other initiatives implemented in reducing CO2e with data centers? And Valerie, I'll let you pose it to Michael, but I think Michael, you're up first.
Gee, to be honest, I have trouble going beyond what I've said in answering that. I think the real challenge is how do you keep this sort of momentum going, right? So we've done this in Canada, in Vancouver. We will continue to look to build more data centers in Canada, which is a community that is responsive, open, and listening. But as you take this, think about the challenge of taking this to where some of the world's biggest financial problems lie, and where a lot of your anti-money laundering and other issues really lie, and finding the right sort of power source, the right sort of regulatory partner, the right sort of people to be in business with in some of those communities makes building clean air data centers very, very challenging, Erica. So there are all sorts of technology ways that we can increasingly step down the power, but we live in a world where people are multiplying the data. So when you used to store email, that was very simple data with very small demand. Now people have to store video content, social media content, and these very, very heavy drive and demand on data content. So we can continue to scale, but scaling that globally for the increasing population is the long-term, beyond this decade challenge. So that's probably the best way I could responsibly answer that question.
Thanks, Michael. And I thought it was very interesting what you were sharing earlier in terms of going back to ancient technology for cooling data centers.
Right. It's, yeah, to me, the real issue is weather versus people and social issues, you know. So I had a long career at Thomson, and Thomson in World War II lost all of its primary law in England when it was bombed. And okay, that seems like a geopolitical event, but you know, Ben and Jay were both relating to weather events, and you know, increasingly these weather events and social needs are going to collide in our world, and we have to find this middle balance. And you know, you got to take your hat off to the people that are driving a hydrogen fuel cell car, you know, because that's giving up the social for the immediate benefit of the wider community.
Thank you, Michael. We have another question, and I wonder if I'm gonna direct it at Jay first, since you're just fresh back from the from COP27 with the Canadian delegation. Any thoughts on what's coming out of COP27 and what you're each trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think maybe the kind of near-term historical trend is, you know, what's coming out of COP aren't the real results everyone's looking for, and we're headed down a long-term journey, and it's just the aggregate ability of the world to be able to contribute to that, to get to the outcome that we need to get to, which is a huge challenge. This was my first COP, so it was just amazing to me to see just, I guess, you know, some of just the technical aspects that go on behind the scenes at a COP. So the actual negotiations that go on, and what has to happen when 194 parties get together and trying to agree on something. So that in of itself is rather Herculean. But you know, coming out of that and addressing kind of what some of the other panelists are saying as well, it's just kind of these near-term, you know, real impacts of climate change that we're beginning to see, and the effects of that, and the ability of either, you know, corporate you know, responsibility or countries' responsibilities to be able to step up and make a change and deliver on the key things. You know, for example, loss and damages was an addition to the agenda this year, and that was probably the most challenging item of the proposed agenda adds. It was the only one that got added this year. There were some results in that area, but still that's going to be an ongoing issue for the COP to deal with it as we do go forward. But it also, I'll go back to Michael too. It's just the social impacts. It's you know, and in my space, in energy delivery space, it's taking into consideration as we go forward the focus on energy justice and the right way to deploy new technology globally, and to get that delivered where it needs to get to without detrimental effects, and really engaging community in how we deliver our new technology will be a key thing for us as we do, you know, go forward and want to deliver our technology.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else want to answer this question around what COP27's outcomes or lack of outcomes are affecting what each of you are trying to accomplish?
Maybe I'll just say that, you know, what we see like is a COP and all the media coming out of it is, oh, we got to act fast. There's such an urgency. And what I find frustrating perhaps is that when you're on the ground trying to build projects, it seems like there's policy barriers, regulatory barriers, getting a permit to build a station. There's so many things that these rules we have in place, which are important. They're there for a reason, but if we don't fundamentally change the way we it's slowing us down so much. So there's days where I feel like, how the hell are we ever going to get there fast enough to hit our decarbonization goals, especially because the longer it's the area under the curve that matters. So the slower we are in getting there, the bigger the impacts are that we have to build infrastructure that can handle this extreme weather that we're causing the further the longer we take. So that's the, I just, hearing these cries that we're not going fast enough, we're not doing enough, I totally agree. And I think that we have to really be honest about what some of the barriers are. Some of them are self-imposed, but my gosh, they're hard to resolve when you're dealing with somebody in the municipal permitting office who doesn't know about a new energy source and is worried about it rightfully, but also it's been done many times before. How do we move faster? I welcome any ideas people have. I do have to say one thing to Michael too, in that it's not a trade-off driving a fuel cell car. They're so awesome. I know you said it's really cool, but it's a sign of having a cool car when your 18-year-old sort of says, "Can I please drive the Nexo?" That's our fuel cell car, because it's just a beautiful electric car, fast pickup, fast fueling. So encourage more of you to give them a try. They're a beautiful electric vehicle to drive.
And maybe if I can jump in here, I mean, Sabine, I think that recognition of kind of some of those encumbrances, I guess it's interesting as I've engaged several different governments around the world, that some governments are becoming aware that that is a real issue. And so for us to be able to get new technologies into the market, we really need to look at our regulatory construct and then what is it that we need to deconstruct in there to make sure that this technology isn't encumbered in getting to the market the way that it needs to. So it's been interesting to see, and I know in our space, the UK has just done some industry leading things to kind of unblock that pathway to allow the technology to go forward unencumbered, whereas other jurisdictions, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge. I think that's spot on. That is spot on.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think we're thinking about this similarly, but I use a phrase when I talk about market selection: we don't like to push ropes. And so what Sabina was describing in terms of localized challenges, we're looking for places where there's market pull. And I think for us as an organization, COP27 is almost, it's too big, it's too high of a level. I mean, they're operating on a global level where there's benefits to it because certain jurisdictions are picking up on the message and actually doing things. And so that's very helpful, right? As Jay said, the UK has been very aggressive in a number of different areas, including fuel cells and hydrogen recently. And a lot of EU countries have really gotten in behind the COP27 goals. And so we're not having to push ropes in a number of European jurisdictions. There's actually market pull, which is helpful for us. So I'm a big believer in investing our heartbeats in places where we expect them to get results. And for us as Loop, the COP27 level of dialogue is not one of those places. I'm glad it's happening, but I do believe it's very bureaucratic and it's going to take a long time. We're looking at smaller locales where we can really get traction and get progress quickly.
Thank you. We're almost at the end of our panel time here. I would love for all of you, because we have many startups here in the audience, to share some words of advice or encouragement for others who are just starting out and want to make it different with climate solutions. A few of you have alluded to how deeply personal this work is to you, and I'd love to hear from you if you have any advice or encouragement for others. Jay?
How about strategic decision making? I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones movies, and especially The Last Crusade. And in that movie, when Indiana Jones runs across the old knight, you must choose, but you must choose wisely, right? So I think making those pathways. I mean, there's the passion that's there behind almost probably everyone that's listening here to take their technology forward and do what they want to do to make an impact. But I think it's doing so strategically, and not don't let the passion blind you. There's a business regimen that has to be behind all of this. So there's got to be focused kind of key demonstrative activities that have to be there to support you being able to advance, what your initiative is going to be. So it's making those right decisions, following it up with, concrete deliverables that allow you to demonstrate what it is that you need to do that will further that cycle, continue to expand it as you grow forward.
Thank you, Jay. So choose wisely in an era where everything seems urgent and important. Make sure you have a business case as well as passion. How about you, Sabina?
I guess my advice would be, there's so many different ways you can contribute positively through your career. And so just pick something, whatever, something that matters to you, some way you think you can make a difference, and be impatient. Like, if things aren't changing, make them change, be aggressive. We need to have everybody trying to push the same way. And there's a lot of choice. There's a lot of great companies now where this is truly, ESG is truly part of who they are. So try to change the company you're at if it's not doing that, and ultimately find somewhere where you can make that big difference. And just don't give up. Like, it feels so dark sometimes when you read the news and you can lose hope, but just don't give up. Just keep moving forward. Humans are incredible. We're adaptive. We're smart. Technology can play an important role, and our own behavior can play a big role too. So I love that, choose wisely, in your career and the way you live your life, and just keep moving forward and don't give up.
Thanks, Sabina. How about you, Michael?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to bounce off Sabina. Where I'm coming from is innovation is hard. Absolutely never give up. But don't just take a unilateral way of thinking about it, right? I think a lot of businesses, I just watched the Elizabeth Holmes piece, the Dropout, and she actually had a fabulous idea, but they settled for a low-grade solution very early and just kept banging away at it. And so I think, the key in business on the cutting edge is to keep innovating and never just accept that you've got there, just keep going. So we thought we had wrung all the goodness we could wring out of our North Vancouver All Clean data center. And just recently we were challenged by the Lonsdale Energy Commission, and they realized that we're throwing off heat. And so they are recycling and capturing and recycling that heat into some of the surrounding developments. And how many of us could be doing something like that? There are many businesses that throw off heat, right? And so it's just really good in the sort of idea of sustainability to just keep innovating. Don't accept complacently that you're okay, you've done a good job, keep going, keep getting better.
Thanks, Michael. And Ben, do you want to round us out with your words of wisdom?
Those are all good words. I guess what I would say is that whether it's your career or starting a business, it's a more of a marathon than a sprint, or it's a sequence of sprints. And so, especially if you've decided that you want to have an impact from a climate change perspective, this is a really big challenge, and it's very easy to get discouraged. So somehow learning to manage that balance between being enthusiastic about making change and going after it every day with the expectation that you can push things forward quickly, but also balancing that with the pragmatic view that most of the things we're trying to do are probably going to take longer. They're still worth doing. You want to have a mentality that allows you to keep at it. And so it's going to be different for everybody. I know it's a challenge for me. When things take longer, sometimes you get discouraged. Finding ways to avoid that discouragement and keep pushing forward is important. And for me, something I don't do enough of that I know I need to do is celebrate the small wins along the way, right? That's something that can help encourage. Sometimes it can feel like you've got this big mission that you're on and you really need to get there, and it makes such a big difference that you don't want to take your foot off the pedal at all. But we're all human beings. There's only so much as individuals we can actually do. And so managing ourselves is just as important so that we can actually complete the race.
Amazing. Thank you, all of you. Really great words of advice and encouragement for all of us working in the climate space, or more broadly in the ESG space, that are facing similar challenges. This was extremely enlightening. I took lots of notes. Jay, especially your wife, I love that note. They're like, go change the world. It's a great cheerleader. I learned a ton today, and I'm sure our audience did as well.